Hello everyone, I'm Isa Guha and welcome along to today's session on how to kick off a career in sports broadcasting. Before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this week's event, organised by the Royal Television Society Midlands. It's their most ambitious careers fair yet. This 4-day event has brought together people from across the world of broadcasting for 6 hours of live stream sessions, masterclasses and workshops every day. I have to say a big thank you to our sponsor as well, the National Film and Television School, a leading global institution who have developed some of Britain and the world's top creative talent. If you can go to the RTS website, rts.org.uk, to find out more about the careers fair and to sign up for sessions, to catch up on those that you've missed as well. And to keep the conversation going, please do get involved at #RTS Careers Fair. And now onto our session. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to shine the spotlight on a career in sports broadcasting and hopefully get some top tips from our panel of industry experts. We'll kick off with a discussion and end with some of your questions. Just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can ask questions as we go along. But first, to introduce our panel, Barbara Slater. Hello to you, Barbara.
Hello.
Barbara has been the Director of Sport for the BBC for more than a decade. In that role, she's responsible for securing the broadcast rights for the BBC and has overseen a raft of major sporting events, including World Cups, Olympics, Euros, and of course, Wimbledon. And I'm particularly delighted that she's helped to bring back international cricket to BBC TV this summer. It was absolutely fabulous. She also oversaw the London Olympics, still the most watched TV event in UK broadcasting, and received an OBE for services to sports broadcasting in 2014. On to Mark Cole. Hello to you, Mark.
Hi, Isha.
Mark has had 20 years experience in sports broadcasting and is presently the MD at Whisper, an independent company who produce some of our top sporting TV action, including Formula One, World Cups, Euros and Paralympics, and we work closely together on the cricket as well this summer. Before joining Whisper, he worked at BBC Sport, leading their football coverage for the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Euros. Over to Jacqui Oatley, presenter and reporter. Hello to you, Jacqui.
Hi, Isha.
Jacqui was the first female to commentate on football for Match of the Day, having switched careers to train as a sports broadcaster after a football injury. She currently presents on ITV, anchoring their darts coverage, and also covers football for Sky Sports, the BBC and The Athletic. A woman of many talents. She's also qualified as an FA coach, an ambassador for women in sport as well, and received an MBE for services to sport. And lastly, we have a man that many of you will know very, very well, Wolves keeper turned football reporter and summariser, Matt Murray. Hi, Matt.
Hi, are you okay?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Just to tell you a bit about Matt, despite a career plagued by injury, he played more than 100 times for Wolves, including helping them secure promotion back to the Premier League in 2003.
Go on,
with a man of the match performance as well. Jackie's a Wolves fan, if you hadn't noticed. Yeah. He also secured 5 under-21 caps for England. In addition to his Sky Soccer appearances, Matt is also a football agent. So if you can't think of any questions, then maybe send in some videos of your football skills. I know that's way better paid than being a journalist or a presenter. A bit about myself. I played cricket for England. I was fortunate to be part of a couple of World Cup wins and an Ashes winning team as well, and now transitioned into sports broadcast, having had the pleasure of working for different broadcasters around the world. So please feel free to fire me anything as well at the end. So let's get things started, shall we? A gentle Under Armour for you all. How did you get into sports broadcasting, and how easy was it to get to where you are now? Barbara, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I started with a career in sport. So my sport was gymnastics. I represented Team GB at the Montreal Olympics. And then when it was time to hand up the handguards, if you like, I actually went and worked with ITV for a period of time. So my job there was to basically advise on gymnastics. That included doing some commentary and punditry, but also, if you like, in the edit suites, advising which gymnast they should put in their edits or not. And I absolutely loved it. And I got to stand behind one of the most talented directors of his time, and he was directing the live programs, Paul Lang. And I sort of stood and watched what he did with the multiple cameras all set out in front of him, directing the show. And honestly, it just sparked a real enthusiasm to want to move into the profession. And interestingly, I was quite keen to work behind the scenes. So my first intro, if you like, was to be on camera. But in the end, I just loved the way they put the program together, and just thought that was a kind of career for me. And then I applied. I had a choice actually of jobs. I could either have gone and been tea girl at Central, which would have been great, or at the same time I was offered one of those little trainee entry-ships at the BBC. And I think the fact that I'd got some experience under my belt really helped me get that. So I joined the BBC a frighteningly long time ago now.
Not that long ago. Well, what would you say have been your sort of main obstacles on your journey?
Well, I have to be honest, it was quite interesting joining a BBC Sports department in the 1980s. I'm not sure they were used to having women around. So, look, I mean, I think what I can say now is it's a transformed industry. It really is, comparing then with now, just so different on so many different fronts. But, I mean, if you told me when I first joined in the 80s that I would ever have been a director of sport, I just would have laughed. I would have said it was impossible. But I believe anybody joining the industry now, quite frankly, if they've got the talent and the skills, they can do and go wherever they want.
Well, you're absolutely bossing it. Mark, over to you. How did you get involved?
Like many, actually, I started in local radio. That was my route into it. And when I was 14, I was reading out the classified football results on Radio Bristol, and was also the cricket score as well. They're sort of equivalent of Andy Zaltzberg. So so that was quite fun. And then I did a degree in journalism, and it was a really sort of practical, hands-on course. And as part of that, I had a 6-week placement at Sky Sports Cricket, and then started there after university, and that was great as well, being around some really good people. And at the time, I then saw an advert for the BBC's trainee assistant producer scheme, and that was dangling the carrot of going to work with a team in the Sydney Olympics. So I took a punt at that and came through and joined Barbara and a lot of other great producers, and then sort of made my way through the BBC. And I had 17 years at the BBC, made the move to Salford as well, and had a really great 5 years there, and got the opportunity to lead the Match of the Day team and working with everyone there. So no, it was brilliant. And then an opportunity came up to try something different and a bit more of a commercial opportunity, working with Whisper and trying to grow that company. It was quite a small company when I joined in 2016, and we've gone from having sort of 8 or 10 people to having over 80 now, and 3 or 4 offices in Wales, in Maidenhead, and we're just opening one in Auckland to help our cricket coverage out there. So it's been a really exciting growth, and been great to be part of that over the last 20 years.
We heard from Barbara say that there weren't many women at the BBC when she first went there. For yourself, obviously, plenty of men around. But were there different challenges in the fact that it was slightly more competitive, would you say?
Yeah, there weren't many Bristolians there, so I was unusual in that sense. But yeah, there were sort of there were challenges, and it was quite a competitive place as well. And I think that's the thing as well. Over the sort of 20 years or so I was at the BBC, it has become a nicer place to work, I'd say, and a lot more collaborative. I think there was that sort of people were out for themselves at times, but it feels like the team that Barbara leads in Salford is a real sort of collaborative team, and I think everyone works together just to try and get as much exposure for the great output that the team produce.
Brilliant. Jacqui, to you, and your journey started on the back of an injury. How did you decide that you wanted to get into sports broadcast, and I guess you've had quite a bit of experience working for many different broadcasters as well. So how has that helped?
Yes, this is my challenge, is to try to keep the time down here and keep it brief, because it is quite a long story. But the shorter version is that I was a mad football fan and travelled all around the country watching my team, including Matt, home and away, and fell into a job, did a German degree, travel around the world for a year, no idea what I wanted to do. Didn't really have the belief that I could work in broadcasting or journalism, just didn't think that was something that was an option for me, because I didn't really see people. And it was only really when I dislocated my kneecap and ruptured my knee ligaments. It was a horrible, horrible injury playing football. And I played every Sunday, watched my team every Saturday. And it was only really when I couldn't do that anymore and was told I couldn't play that I thought, I need to do something about this. I need to finally get into journalism, sports broadcasting, something to do with sport. I wanted to be immersed in sport and for that to be my everyday life. So I researched online, read people's biographies online. I did evening courses, introduction to print journalism. I did hospital radio, doing a sports report on there every day, and introduction to radio production as well. All things I found out about locally while still in my job. And at the end of 6 months of those courses, I decided, okay, this is definitely what I want to do, but how do I go from a full-time job and paying rent to a job that frankly thousands and thousands and thousands of people want to do and are much better qualified than me to do. So I decided I had to throw everything at it, and I decided to give up my job, give up my flat, slept on friends' floors, wherever I could, doing full-time work experience, and absolutely loved it, and thought, well, the next step, if I can't get an actual job, is to retrain, because I really wanted to learn the ropes. I wanted to learn right from the very bottom. So started with hospital radio, those evening courses, and then moved up to Sheffield to do a 1-year postgrad full time. And as soon as I got there, I wrote to all the local BBC radio stations and said, I'm a mature student. I was 27 3/4. And said, I'm in a hurry. I'm not interested in the student life of going out and socialising all the time. I've done all that first time around. Can I come and see you? And so a couple of days work experience in TV news at BBC Leeds led to me going in, finding the sports editor, tracking him down and said, please, can I do some radio sport? And started doing non-league football roundup for a quarter of an hour on a Saturday afternoon, setting up my own guest and reading the roundup of the scores way before social media provided them. You had to phone around all the clubs and get them. Absolutely loved it. And one thing led to another. And I just found the harder I worked, the more I threw everything at it, the more opportunities came up, and I worked all around the country in news. I'd go to BBC WM to do a news shift, and then I'd go back to Leeds to do a sport shift, and then down to London. 5 Live phoned me up and started doing overnights there, and eventually the weekend breakfast sports news. And I was commuting up and down from Leeds to London, overnight shifts, straight back on the train. And that's really how doors opened to me, is that I just got my head down, just worked extremely hard, and opportunities came up, and one thing led to another. And that's how, fortunately, things have progressed in terms of local radio to national radio to television, even though TV was not my aim, not my goal. I had zero interest in TV, to be perfectly honest. It seemed a right old faff when I was doing my postgrad course. It took ages to make 2 minutes of television compared to radio. But I do actually love working in TV because I like the teamwork element of it. And in terms of working for different broadcasters, that's been really, really good for me. I absolutely loved working at the BBC from 2000 onwards. I'm still working 5 Live, Radio 4, etc. now. And I think being asked to go to ITV to do their Euros, World Cup, international football, and now the darts as well, has been really good, getting a different perspective from a commercial point of view. I think it's really a positive thing to get different aspects of broadcasting experience and different media as well. And now I do podcasting as well for The Athletic. And it's been very beneficial, I'd say, working across all disciplines, commentating, reporting, presenting, podcasting, and different sports as well. So it's been an absolute privilege, but it is pretty hard work as well. It's certainly not a walk in the park, but I feel very fortunate to be able to do it for a living.
I think you touched on it a little bit. There are so many different disciplines in broadcast. As a presenter, as a reporter, which you've been, a commentator. We'll come back to your commentary in just a moment, but over to Matt and you obviously leaving the game, but did you feel a need to really just try and learn all the different disciplines early on so you could figure out what you were best at, or did it just kind of happen for you?
Yeah, it just sort of happened for me. I never first thought that I was going to retire at 29 years of age. So like Jacqui, I had a serious injury. I'd already had a few injuries, but I was still under contract with Wolves. So that gave me a little bit of time to find my feet. And while you're quite a current player, then you feel that the media are actually happier to have you than you are them, if that makes sense. So when you can go and do the Wolves games and I was still a current player, and you've got that insight and you do it. I always would do interviews after games for the media people, so they sort of helped me then. So it's you reap what you sow. So the fact that I didn't used to sneak off from interviews, and everyone on here will probably tell you that they arrange, pros would arrange to do an interview and then think, oh, I can't be bothered, and sneak out the back door, and there'd be a camera crew there and everything else. And I would never do that, or I'd fill in for people when some of the first team lads had done that. So that opened the doors for me. I was very nervous, didn't have a clue. All these cameras and this and that, but I always had a sort of saying, just what's the worst going to happen? Face the fear and do it anyway. So just went out there, tried it with the TV, did the radio as well. And it meant that I could watch Wolves, could watch other teams. And it's always gone hand in hand with whatever I did, whether it's coaching or agency work. And then slots opened up. I was always prepared to go anywhere at any time, last minute. And I just loved it. So to get paid to watch football, which I love anyway, and I've gradually just transitioned into the role, but I've never done any courses or anything like that. I've just literally learned on the job. Someone was ill one night, I got thrown in, and I'd like to think I've improved a little since my first ever report, but it's been great fun. And yes, it was just something that I tried and had to reinvent myself because of injury.
I think it just shows that there are many ways to get involved in sports broadcast. I was quite similar actually, in that I didn't have that much TV or radio experience, and I was just kind of thrown in at the deep end, and I just kind of tried to embrace it. But again, didn't necessarily take it it was just an experience at the time, because there weren't that many opportunities, and then you start to get more and more, and that's when you think, okay, well, actually I really need to get my head down and work hard at this. But Jacqui, to your experience of being the first woman to commentate on Match of the Day, I mean, what came with that in terms of how the public saw it? What led to it as well, in terms of you deciding that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, from when I started out in local radio, I couldn't understand why females would come into local radio. Not many of them, admittedly, there weren't many of us around at the time, and then automatically stop once you get to sports bulletins where everyone starts, and then match reporting is what I asked to do. But then there was when I say a glass ceiling, I just didn't see anybody going beyond that. It seemed to be, well, know your limits, that's kind of what you do, and no one really talks about it. And I just thought, well, I was complete and utter football obsessive. I still am, nothing's changed. And I couldn't see why I wouldn't at least have a go at it. It didn't mean to say I'd be any good at it, but I thought I definitely wanted to have a go. And so I asked my sports editor at the time, and having started in match reporting in non-league football, then an opportunity came up one day to do a match, because I think another match had been called off for the weather, and I'd actually done the breakfast shift sport that day, so it wasn't the best timing. I've been up since 3:30. And also there was no information about non-league football on the internet those days, so I was like, yeah, I'll do that game, because I'd already asked to do a match if one came up, and I was squirreling around trying to find some information. So it was probably the hardest match I've ever done, the worst position, right at the back of Wakefield and Emley, their ground, and managed to get the injured captain to join me at the last minute, and all the players looked the same. They're all 6 foot with short dark hair, and the numbers were miles away, so player identification was the hardest. But I just thought if I could get through that, I'd get through anything. And then one thing led to another. The more I did that, and was doing more for 5 Live, and I was doing matches, commentaries for Sports Extra, the digital channel of 5 Live, and for 5 Live itself. So I was doing matches regularly, and as happened frequently at the time and now, I would say, is that if you were regular there, you tended to get offered a match on Match of the Day. And contrary to popular opinion, it was never a job I'd been offered in a million years. I was just asked by the editor, would you like to do a match? And I was like, well, yes, please. And then in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, I hope nobody notices I'm not a geezer, because that would be a little unfortunate and might be a bit uncomfortable. And I thought, well, they might notice, but hopefully they won't notice until midnight that Saturday night when it's all over, and it won't be that big a deal. But that was extremely naive, because unfortunately it was picked up on the Tuesday before the match, and unfortunately it grew legs and became an incredible media storm, which was literally the last thing I wanted. But that's life. You just have to go with these challenges, face them head on. And all I did was just go to ground, didn't do a single interview, didn't engage with anybody at all, let people get on with their phone-ins and what have you, when they talked about how can you let a woman who's never kicked a ball in her life commentate on football. And I just, yeah, okay, whatever. And that was it. I just got on with it, and I just think one of the positives about this job is that you do come up against challenges on a frequent basis, things you've not done before, and you think, wow, okay, and then you do it, and then the next time it becomes easier, and the next time it becomes easier, and the next time you're asked to do something out of your comfort zone that you haven't done before, then you can face it. So yeah, somebody has to be the first to do things, and it's just great now that I don't think anybody's that fussed about female commentators. It's just a case of, it's, as you know, Isha, you can get on with it and be allowed to get on with it, which is great.
But that's what you've done, I guess, is you've almost normalized it, so it doesn't become a thing anymore. You know, people just listen to a female voice, and it's just normal, you know. So automatically just creating opportunities for other women out there, for sure, coming into to broadcast. I want to go back to Barbara and Mark, and how you kind of view things in terms of when you're putting a team together. So there's a lot of former athletes that come straight into broadcast, and they're sort of there for their experiences and the fact that they kind of know the teams really well. But how important is it to have that blend of former professionals, but also those with journalistic prowess?
Well, I think you need both. And in any team, I think it's important there's a mix, because you need those journalism skills. But actually, I think a modern audience also wants to hear from those that have been there and done it, kind of at the highest level. And I suppose what the most overriding importance is the passion for sport. And you can have that passion without necessarily having played it. It's interesting what you were saying, Jacqui. I mean, you have been a brilliant trailblazer, and you have frankly paved the way for, I think, so many other women to come into the profession. And nobody can argue about your expertise. You research, you genuinely have that, and that, you know, whether you played at the highest level, it still means you know what you're talking about. And I think that's the most important thing. And the fact is, I think ex-athletes, there's no reason why they can't progress and train and gain those journalism skills. It's around, I think, within any one team that you want to mix. But I mean, I think what's interesting is it's been such an extraordinary period, I think, for British sport. If you turn the clock back, I mean, just taking the Olympic sport family, and you think we used to cheer if we used to win one medal almost, and now we're sort of so successful. There are really significant numbers of champion athletes, if you like, coming through with an ambition to maybe move into broadcasting. And so I think it is an incredibly competitive space, but it's about passion, expertise, being able to speak with authority, and of course sometimes being an athlete helps you do that, but I don't think it's exclusively that.
I agree with Barbara. I think, yeah, it's definitely about having a balance across the team. I think there are real advantages for athletes who do make that transition, because I think, as I've sort of discussed with Gary Lineker, and I think we spoke about it, Isha, over the summer, is as a presenter who's played the game, you know the answers as well as the questions. So it's a really good way that you can help guide some of that chat and some of that dialogue. So you have got that added level of insight that you have been out there in the middle and you know what it's like. But equally, there are some brilliant broadcasters, as Barbara's mentioned. Jacqui's one of them. We work regularly with Mark Chapman, Steve Jones, Lee McKenzie, Jeff Stelling, who obviously Matt works with most weekends, Dan Walker. there's some brilliant broadcasters out there. Gabby Logan's another who we work with really closely at Whisper on the women's football, who have got that ability to ask those right questions. And I think that the secret to me is, when you haven't played the game, is almost not making it about you. Your job as a presenter is to get the best out of those people around you. And sometimes you're in a really good position to do that when you can take that step back and say, look, this isn't about me and it's my point. You put the viewer's point of view, and then the people who you're talking to can add that level of insight. So I think as long as you get that balance across the team, then I think it really works. But there are definite advantages for people who make that transition, and also people who, as they come to the end of their time in the game, start to think already about the next step. And as Matt was saying, be there to do the interviews, be there, get that practice. Like Gary Lineker always talks about, when he was in the World Cup squads, he was already thinking, his nickname was Junior Des, I think, when he was in those teams. So yeah, always being that step ahead. But that is equally important as well as Barbara was saying about those who haven't played the game. Just get that research done, get that opportunity, and don't make it about you. And I think there are opportunities for everyone.
A good example of that is your colleague, Isha, is Alison Mitchell. She's never played cricket to any particular level, and one of the most respected broadcasters around, sport or otherwise. And I think also one of the key things is not making it out as if you do know everything. And that's one of the most important things as a presenter. For example, I do the darts, and the number of times that we go on air, just before we go on air, I say to my pundits, I said, don't always assume too much knowledge, because yes, you are talking to the diehards who know the ins and outs. But also we're trying to attract a wider audience. That's part of my job as a presenter, is to open it up to other people who might have seen on Twitter, we've got a show that night, and they think, oh, what's this all about? So you don't want to make it too painting by numbers, but equally you don't want to assume too much knowledge. And I think with cricket, that's an important thing as well, because as somebody who loves cricket but is by no means an expert, in the sense that you are, Isha, I'd love to be able to watch without too much knowledge assumed. I want to have certain things that have happened on the pitch explained. And so people who are watching this who aren't professional sports people, which is probably vast majority, don't think that you do need to have played sport to a high level. The main thing is being able to ask the right questions that you think the audience would like to know the answers to.
Absolutely. It's something that myself and knowing your audience is the key to broadcast, isn't it? And I'm sure Barbara would agree when she's putting things together, and Mark as well. I've had the pleasure of working in different spaces around the world, in India, where they just love excitement. When you're speaking about anything, you just have to literally go to another decibel. When you're in Australia, it's a bit more banter led, and then here in the UK, it's probably a bit more about letting the coverage breathe. But even that's changing, I think, these days. Matt, I just want to ask you about that transition to being in the media, and how you found it as a player, in terms of, did you feel like you could be truly critical about players that you played with or against when you first left the sport?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing, right? Especially when you're still in the dressing room. So sometimes I'd be doing a Wolves game and I was still actually a Wolves player. So, if one of your friends has just got a straight red card or missed a chance, or a goalkeeper's made a mistake, and you've got to talk about that, you have to give an opinion. You can't, you can't lie. You know what I mean? You've got to, or just to say, oh, I'd be disappointed with that. You have to put some context on it. I always believe, because I was being the pundit, the ex-player, it's for me to say why it's happened. We've been there, we've experienced it. You know what it's like. I think that sometimes you always were worried as well even when I retired, about being personal. You didn't want to be personal. You got to offer an opinion and say what you see, but don't be critical or personal. I feel some people try and say things to be controversial, thinking that that's going to get them further. So I like to try and be objective about what I'm saying, but know that if I do see those people in the street, I can still see, say hello and look them in the eye. But sometimes people, I have had sometimes former colleagues ring me up and say, oh, you're a bit harsh on me there, I didn't agree with this and that. But I think a lot of the time I use my connections as an advantage, so I can get insight already before a game. I'll ring players from both sides, never ever divulge it before and compromise anyone. But I think that insight is very, very helpful, very useful. But a big thing for me, one of my insecurities that I had to overcome, was a lot of the times when I'm working on Sky, I'm working with people 15 major honours, 20 major honours, and you know, I got promoted to Wolves and I played for Wolves, which is a big club, but I didn't have the international careers, and to sometimes debate with those sort of people and offer my opinion, that was a bit. So I always used to seek a lot of constructive advice and feedback from my producers, and that's something that helped me a lot. But yeah, the personal side, getting that balance, I think is one of the biggest things that former players, you know, have to contend with.
Matt's absolutely spot on there, and that's why the likes of, I think, Danny Higginbotham's doing so well, because when I've done Youth Cup finals and stuff with him, we'll show up and we'll be chatting before a match, and he's spoken to managers in the week, he's spoken to people who know those players, and so it's the sort of journalistic side that a pundit, an ex-player, can bring, and those are the ones really, regardless of how big a name they might be or how many caps they've got for their country, they're more likely to be called back if they're the ones that can actually offer some insight, and as Matt says, insight is absolutely key with pundits. It really, really is. So if you can bring some inside knowledge, then you're very much likely to be asked back.
I think you're also right in terms of getting the balance right, and there's ways you can say things. That's what I certainly learned when I was on commentary, was if you want to be harsh about someone but you don't want to be too harsh, you can always say by their standards. So you know they're absolutely going to think the same thing, but like it's all in the vocab for sure. Okay, well, we're rattling through this very quickly, so I'm going to get on to some questions, and let's see if I can do this right. Okay, Liz Bandari has messaged in to say, I have a marketing background, but I'm a keen writer and podcast host covering American football, one of very few female voices in the UK. What advice could you give to help me go into a broadcasting career? Barbara, I'll start that one with you.
Well, in a way, Liz, I have to just say, keep at it. You've obviously got a passion. And I think one of the interesting things in the sort of industry now is there's so much capability for people to a certain extent do things themselves. You know, the technology exists for you to do things like podcasts, and actually it might be slow, but you know, you can grow a following, and if you are expert, and you know, you can gain a reputation within that NFL community for being a real expert, then you know, that's something to build on. I don't think it happens overnight, and you know, the amount of coverage about NFL in the UK, you know, it's growing. It's not enormous at the moment, but I think BBC does some of the NFL coverage. Channel 5 will be doing some of the NFL coverage, and of course there's Sky. But there's a great number of fans, and one of the things that you can do, I'm sure, Liz, is make a connection with a lot of those fans with what you're doing and grow your skills in the meantime.
Jacqui, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I absolutely echo what Barbara says about the technology these days is wonderful, that you can literally prove what you can do. And I think getting air miles is important. Just like if you're going to be a pilot, then you need to get air miles to be as good as you possibly can for that. And it's the same thing with podcasting and broadcasting. The more you practice, ideally with some feedback, I would say, if you can get in touch with a experienced broadcaster to watch or listen to some of your stuff and give you feedback. So if you are making sort of some sort of I don't know, errors, but if there is something that maybe you repeat a phrase all the time and you weren't aware of it, or there's something else you're doing, or maybe when I listen to a lot of podcasts, some of them really waffle for the first 10-15 minutes and I think, why don't they just get on with it? There may be that kind of feedback that you can get from somebody who maybe is in the business if you really are keen to progress. So I think feedback and trying to correct anything that maybe needs correcting from a professional point of view, and then keep doing it, and then send your stuff to people who might be able to actually commission you. You have the technology, the means to be able to get in touch with people. So get the air miles first and be as good as you can, and then try to apply to see where you might be able to get paid for it, or maybe get a sponsor yourself and become a professional yourself if you have a following sufficiently.
Great stuff.
Picking up on what Jacqui was saying as well, there's so much that you can do to self-help. I mean, you will have broadcasters that you respect, broadcasters that, you know, clearly are doing it incredibly well. Watch, listen, learn what works, what doesn't work. You can be a critic of yourself as much as anyone else, but there are people out there who are, you know, really exponing this profession at the highest level. Watch, listen, learn.
Perfect. Another question in from Niall. Hi guys, appreciate your time this afternoon. There still seems to be a stigma in the industry that it is who you know, not what you know. In my 6 or 7 year broadcasting career so far, all the work I've picked up has been off my own back, but sometimes it can take months or even years to find the right person to track down for opportunities. Regarding this, how important are agents in the current climate? Should I consider getting one to progress my career? Mark, I'm going to throw that one to you as someone who has dealt with agents.
I don't think we need any more agents. That's fine. We're good where we are. But no, I don't think we're at the stage. Like, I know a lot of sort of in America that's quite a sort of a common thing, but I don't think we're at the stage where you necessarily need agents at that early stage. I think I don't think it's all about sort of who you know. I think there are opportunities in it. If you are good and you're persistent and you are distinctive, then I think there are opportunities to progress. So I think it is about being clever and being smart in how you approach things, and realizing that if you send your CV to Barbara, then Barbara has about 500 CVs every month. So actually look at your interests, look at, say, okay, I like the NFL. Ron Chakraborty leads the BBC's NFL. Let's go in. Let's look at different people in different ways. And that's what I did when I started off. I found the name of the executive producer at Sky Cricket, and I wrote to him. I didn't go straight to the top. It's about picking out who you're going to go and being a bit clever and being a bit different in your approach. Like, rather than just saying, can I have a job? Saying, okay, actually, here's some feedback to some of your coverage as a viewer. And then you suddenly, it's different in your inbox when it appears. And it's like, oh, actually, that's a really good point they've made about our coverage that we're making. Oh, and actually they're keen to get in there, so I respect their opinion, I respect their view. It's not just like, here's my CV. You have to make that personal connection to get through, because it's an amazing industry to be in, and because of that, lots of people want to be in it. So you have to go that extra mile to try and break through. So I don't think you need an agent, but I think that persistence and just being quite sort of clever about the way you approach it is probably a good way to go.
And just to add, just quickly, sorry, Isha, on what I was saying, I do think, have ideas.
Yeah.
So if there's something you want to get involved in, and you look at it and you think, what stories aren't they telling? What stories might I be able to tell that they're not doing so? And so I do think, rather than just a CV, actually sending in some ideas as to what might enhance the coverage, etc., is always gratefully received.
Sorry, just back to Mark. We've had one from Anonymous. Okay. Is the Whisper mentorship scheme going to be happening this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're continuing our mentoring schemes. We've got a really strong partnership with Royal Holloway University and also with Cardiff Met University. So those schemes are continuing, and also we're going to carry on where we can with our networking events. So we have networking events every 6 months. So anyone who's interested in joining, try and get onto the Whisper social media channels. That's where we advertise all our jobs and details of networking events and the mentoring schemes. But it's been amazing for us. We've had, I think, over sort of 30 placements as part of the scheme, and 7 full-time graduates have joined us as part of that. So it's definitely something that's really flourishing and working well. And yeah, and also it keeps us in touch with the way that the industry is changing as well. We have so many meetings at Whisper, and I'm sure it's the same with others, about how do we attract this 16 to 34-year-old audience. There's no better way than employing people in that group, because they tell you they're constantly across all those changing trends, and how people are consuming content. So it's a real big asset that you bring when you come to a company, is that you are the market that we're all trying to appeal to. So it's a really good thing, as Barbara says, if you can get those ideas in about what you want to watch, then that's what we want to make in a lot of things.
Awesome. Make sure you look out for that then, the mentorship scheme. Charlotte, how can I make myself stand out from other people who also have the same passion for the sport or experience as me? Matt, over to you. Yeah,
I think, you know, in the line of work we're all in, it is really, really competitive. One of the biggest things that, you know, I'm echoing some of the things here, that you watch people that have been successful. So when I was a young footballer, I'd look at people like Mike Stowell and think, why has he played 400 or 500 games in goal for Wolves? So I want to look at him, see why he's been successful, but then you've got to be yourself. So when I went on to Soccer Saturday, one of the first things Ian Condren said to me, the producer, was, we've already got a Cammy, so don't try and be a Cammy, you know? There's people like that. So I think you look at successful people. I worked for free for loads of people, went around, studied it, became a student of the game, but then just put my twist on it. So I think it's just, you need that little bit of luck. You need that break. One of the things that I hate in football, people say, oh, don't be busy, don't be busy. Well, one of my ways of getting in and being part of the team, if you like, of Soccer Saturday, was I was still a current player. So I used to set up interviews for the show, and got them access to players that they wouldn't have been able to do. So if there's any way that you've got a certain contact, a certain insight, something that's different that's brought along, then try and use that. And so don't be overbearing, but be keen. Show people that you're really, really enthusiastic and you want to do things. And so not be too pushy, but at the same time, put yourself forward. And like Jacqui did for her first ever game, she's probably really nervous and it was really difficult and you're outside your comfort zone. But someone always says, be comfortable being uncomfortable. So go out there, try it. What's the worst that can happen? So I think that, yeah, just try and find some way where you're a little bit unique, but you will improve. The best way to do it is going out there and trying and being prepared to fail, make mistakes, learn from it. So all that reflecting, everything you do, always after every show I still do, I would still reflect on it. So to try and get that little break, I think will take a little bit of luck. But also, I think Mark mentioned it as well, networking's massive. So if you can go to games and be around, you just bump into people. And there's people that will come up to me in press rooms and say, oh, could you help me in this way? Could you help me in that way? Are there any doors you can open? And a lot of people start with like local radio, local things like that, get their break. And before you know it, then it's going really, really well for you. And then you might need an agent because you're getting so much work offered to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is true. If we just jump in there, just echoing what Matt says about using any kind of contacts that you have, and also trying to be yourself, but you've also got to think, well, lots of other people are maybe writing blogs about Liverpool or Manchester United, and everybody else is talking about sort of the low-hanging fruit of sport, what you see so much. But do you have an interest in badminton or ice hockey or something that's a little bit different? Are you really interested in something that everybody else isn't always talking about? So can you blog about that? Can you make podcasts about that? Because everybody needs, say when the Olympics comes along, everybody needs an expert in a sport that nobody else ever covers the rest of the year, for example. So if that's something you can make yourself useful for, then that's good. So absolutely, if you don't have those contacts, don't complain that you don't have the contacts or you don't have a next door neighbor who works in the industry, because I didn't know anybody in this industry, and I just bashed on the doors and skilled myself up as well as I could to try to make myself as good at the job as I possibly could to make myself employable. So it's not about who you know necessarily, but it is who you get to know, so you can make those contacts via social media. There are people I send messages to, people I mentor all the time because they contacted me out the blue, and so when jobs come up I'll message them, or if I hear if somebody's looking for somebody I'll message them, but that's because they contacted me in the first place. So don't just sit there thinking it's too hard. Make it happen for yourself, back yourself, make it happen. Don't sit around waiting for the letterbox to flat when you've applied for a job. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Try and get in front of people, try and talk to people, try and get feedback from people. Keep going and make it happen for yourself.
A perfect way to finish. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Would you believe that? thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. Sorry we couldn't get through them all, but hopefully there's been enough there from Barbara, Mark, Matt and Jacqui to take home, and good luck with your onward journeys, I guess. You can continue the conversation via the RTS website and on social media at RTS_MID capitals, hashtag RTS Careers Fair. So feel free to continue that chat, and I'd like to once again say thank you to all of the panelists for giving up their time today. It really is much appreciated, and I'm sure everyone else has enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.